Giving Pittsburgh a better alternative. Giving Pittsburgh a better alternative. Yeah. Extra, reading the issue. Raw news, unapologetic, no tissue.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pittsburgh Current Podcast, brought to you live from Sorgatron Media in beautiful Beachview Business District. I'm editor and publisher of the Pittsburgh Current, Charlie Deitch, and we have a good show today. We have independent District Attorney candidate Lisa Middleman with us. But before we get to that, I just want to let you know that the new issue of the Pittsburgh Current is out on the streets this week. Pick it up. It's a cover story that I'm quite proud of. A cover story of a story that needed to be told about a young gifted young artist named Miles Sale, who lost his life a couple of years ago to depression. And so this tells his story and his family and friends' effort to sort of help others make sure that they don't come to the same fate. So please check out that story. Also, there's as always great music, art, and coverage of the Real Q LGBTQ Film Festival that's starting this weekend. Also, I want to tell you about the next Pittsburgh Current event is a Repeal Day party on Thursday, December 5th from 7 to 10. It's at the Speakeasy at Max's Allegheny Tavern. I didn't know there was a Speakeasy there, but there is. And we're going to have drinks, Prohibition cocktails provided by Quantum Spirits, craft brews by Enix Brewing. And that's at Max's Allegheny Tavern. And you can find information on our website, pittsburghcurrent.com. And on our Facebook page, you can find that listing. But today we're going to talk politics, not drinking, although politics sometimes leads to drinking and vice versa, I think. Lisa Middleman is an independent candidate for District Attorney, Allegheny County District Attorney, and she joins us today on the show. Lisa, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure. So little backstory, I guess, for folks, and I'm sure folks who are watching this and interested kind of know the backstory. Stephen Zappala, the district attorney, longtime district attorney, was challenged in the primary by Teron Jenkins. Zappala came out on top, and afterwards, you declared in July, I believe, your candidacy as an independent. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to do that.
Well, I supported Teron in the primary,
right,
and was very disappointed that his campaign was unable to be successful. Mm-hmm. But I saw that a lot of people did support the idea of change in the district attorney's office. And I've watched 20 years of failed policies and thought I cannot watch another 4 years. So that's why I jumped in the race.
And you saw these policies play out you had a front row seat basically as a public defender, as a defense attorney. You were right there the whole time. As someone on the other side of the table from the district attorney's office, what has your view been of the main problems coming from the district attorney's office?
I think I can tell you the reason for the main problems,
yeah,
or what I believe to be the reasons for the main problems, which is a total lack of disengagement with the people that the criminal justice system most affects.
Right.
And the other thing is, I was reading the grand jury report on the problems in the Catholic Church in preparation for a candidate forum that Zappala didn't show up for, but I was prepping for it. And I thought to myself, this is what happens when you support and defend the institution rather than the people that the
right,
institution is supposed to be serving. And that's what I think is going on with the criminal justice system. We're feeding and supporting this system rather than the actual individuals that the system is supposed to be protecting and helping.
Right. That actually is, I had an interview with DA Zappala before the spring primary, and one of the things that I asked him was, this was probably 2 weeks after the Michael Rosefeld trial. Michael Rosefeld, the police officer who was charged and went on trial for the killing of Antoine Rose, 17-year-old Antoine Rose, who was unarmed and shot in the back. That resulted in an acquittal for the police officer, and there have been a lot of people, and we'll talk about that particular case. But during that interview, I asked him how he took the public's, did he see that the public wasn't happy with him? And he told me that he had never really heard any complaints. Now, this is after a year of protest, most of the time outside of the building where he works, from people upset about the Antoine Rose case. And I think that goes to what you're saying about not listening, or not, I don't want to say not caring, but certainly not listening and not acting on what the public is saying. It surprised me that he said that, because it almost just showed he was either turning a blind eye to it or didn't care. Honestly, was my thought. So, so you believe that's a situation that has that's maybe caused the distance between himself and the community, particularly the black community, is his failure to hear or his failure to listen, maybe.
Right. He's totally disengaged from what those folks think. When you run for office, which is something I learned, you go everywhere. And when you can't only go to the Fox Chapel picnic.
Right.
You should go to the Braddock Street Fair. You should go to the Rankin Street Fair. You should go to places in the Mon Valley. You should go to Homewood. You should hear what the people in the communities that your policies most affect have to say. And I've never seen him at any of those places.
You mentioned have there been many candidate forums, and have you seen him face to face at any of these forums that you've gone to?
It appears that he will not answer questions about his policies anywhere.
Right. And it almost seems, I mean, there's again, I'm not putting words in your mouth. These are my words clearly, but there's almost an arrogance there about who he answers to, I think, sometimes. And he has, strong union support and so forth, and the kind of typical, Democratic Party backers. But you obviously, coming into this, you have to be looking at getting your support at the ground level. How's that going?
It's going really well.
Yeah.
I think because I don't walk in with a feeling of entitlement.
Yeah.
I'm not entitled to this job. I'm working to earn the respect of the people, and I'm working and will continue to work to earn my position.
Right.
So I don't expect it to be handed to me, and I expect for people to challenge me. I would like to be challenged, and I expect then when I win for those same people to help me and support me and to be part of the office.
Right. Let's talk about some of these issues that you're talking about, and a lot of them are these areas where you mentioned that DA Zappala is affecting other communities. One of them is ending mass incarceration, and that's huge. Our prison system is overcrowded. We have Allegheny County historically has overcharged and put a lot of folks in our prison and in our jail system over the past several years. What are your thoughts on how the DA's office has added to that problem, and what are your thoughts about how to fix it?
Well, I think they've added to the problem by overcharging significantly.
Yeah.
There was a 2016 University of Pittsburgh report that indicated that they're overcharging in 37% of felony cases. And when you overcharge, you force people to plead because they're terrified, to go to trial on the heavier charge that might send them to prison.
Right.
That's one way we've packed the county jail. The other way is by incarcerating people who have mental health problems or addiction problems, and we should be ashamed of the number of people that are locked up for human frailties. And it's very difficult, and I think it's very disingenuous to say that you're trying to end mass incarceration when you're actually the cause of mass incarceration. Right. And the jail keeps records and keeps track of the population, and it's never steady. There's always an up and down and up and down. And so you can cherry pick statistics about, a year ago, it was this, and now today it's lower. Yes, but the average inmate population at the county jail has not significantly changed in 3 years since this report came out. So we can change mass incarceration. You just have to actually want to.
Talk about some, and I brought this up because Teron Jenkins had some interesting ideas about diversionary programs, and he said that he didn't feel that there were enough diversionary programs that work, or real diversionary programs that keep people from being kind of branded for life. And when I asked, again, earlier this year, when I asked the DA about that, he said, well, we have diversionary programs. You're pitching, you have some ideas for diversionary programs. How do yours differ from what the diversionary, because there is drug court, there are some things like that. But how do your ideas differ, and how are these failing, folks?
They're not diversionary programs.
Yeah.
There's one diversionary program in Allegheny County, and that's ARD.
Right.
Because a true diversionary program means you're totally diverted out of the criminal justice system. It's not diverted out of the jail or diverted out of probation. It's diverted out of the system. And there are jurisdictions all over the country that are doing it the right way.
Right.
Which is you're an addict or you suffer from addiction, you have a mental health problem. Instead of having to plead guilty to get the help that you need, you go through the program, you satisfy the program, and the charges are withdrawn.
Right.
It gives you some incentive to go into the programs. As a defense attorney, if I have a client who is facing a couple of months in jail versus years of treatment and effort and work, I tell them, just do your 3 months or 2 months and be done.
Right.
It's easier, it's cheaper, and you won't have as many problems.
Right.
And it's not, that viewpoint is not one that's going to actually benefit the client and benefit society. So
Right.
you have to give people an incentive to do the right thing. And the incentive is do it right. We'll drop the charges.
Yeah. It's difficult, and you would know better than I as a lawyer, but it's difficult to get your record expunged or to get those things wiped after the fact. And that's one of the things that I had mentioned in that is it's tough to, if you can avoid putting that person in the system from day one, the charge is still hanging over them if they don't complete their side of the bargain, if they don't finish the treatment or the program. What would be the reason to do it the way that it's being done now? Why kind of force these guilty pleas? I mean, maybe even not specifically, but as a lawyer, what difference does it make, I guess, is my question. Does it make a difference in whether you to go to drug court, you have to plead guilty, or you can, have the charge hanging over you and you go through either a similar program or something, and then if you complete it, you're not charged at all? Is there a philosophical, I don't know. I guess I'm having trouble seeing what the point is of insisting on the conviction.
You'll have to ask Steven Zappala if you can catch him anywhere. But yeah, there's no reason for it. Because if you are really trying to give somebody a leg up and say, we know you struggle, we know you suffer, we're going to help you.
Yeah.
You can't then say, oh, but we're also going to saddle you with a conviction so you can't get public housing,
Right.
You can't get loans, you can't get a job. And you'll be in incredible debt because a criminal conviction also carries a lot of court costs.
Right. And I was going to ask you, as a defense attorney, talk a little bit about what that is. A guilty conviction for a low-level drug offense, let's say, few months in the county prison or in the county jail. But what is the lasting impact of that on someone?
Well, the lasting impact is that you have a criminal record.
Yeah.
And I just met a woman at a church, Valley View, who's very upset and concerned. She has a mom who's trying to get into public housing, but she has a criminal conviction.
Wow.
And they're saying, we can't let you in. It's an old criminal conviction, but it's an old age home.
Right.
And she
Wow.
can't get in because she has a felony from however long ago. And that's nonsensical.
Yeah.
She's been absolutely, crime-free for years, and she has mental health issues, but she can't get
Right.
in to senior citizen housing. So those are the kinds of things that happen when you have a criminal conviction. You have every time that you're arrested, it's noted, and if you can't get it expunged, your prior arrests will come up in risk assessments, so that if you get arrested again, but you've been arrested 17 times, so you have to be in jail until your trial. Those are the kinds of things that happen to you when you have all these prior arrests that aren't wiped off.
Right.
The Public Defender's Office has a great program where they are helping people get records expunged, but you can't get a conviction expunged
Right.
for anything other than a misdemeanor 3 or below.
Wow.
And most crimes are not misdemeanor 3s or below.
Right.
Theft, possessions, they're not going to get wiped off your record, and not for 10 years.
Wow. And so, yeah, that's a long stretch where maybe not unemployable, but it's pretty close, if not unemployable for that period of time. at least at anything, at a job that would help you get your life turned around and
or
back
move
on track.
forward.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
move up.
move away and move forward. Yeah. We talked about overcharging. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about a recent case. The chuckle wasn't at the case. The chuckle was at the fact that at the result. So we have the incident at the McKnight Road Exxon station where 2 black women were beaten by 3 men. I think the station owner and 2 employees.
Well, that was at the north side.
Oh, yes.
It
Sorry.
was in the north side.
Yeah, sorry. North side. Yeah. So the charges come from the DA's office. The charges are simple assault, correct? A misdemeanor instead of aggravated assault. And the district attorney said that he was confident, or I'm sorry, that these were the charges that were just because there wasn't. He said it didn't meet the standard of aggravated assault. And I'm not an attorney, you are, so I'm gonna let you answer that. But then also he made the comment, I'm not going to politicize. I could charge them higher and politicize this issue, but I'm not going to do that. I don't know. It's kind of tough to sort of, if you look back at the record, it's kind of tough maybe to see that is ever a motive. But talk to me a little bit about that case, and talk to me a little bit about that idea. First of all, let's go with that idea that simple assault is the only charge that could have come out of that case.
That's absolutely incorrect. And I was very dismayed to hear the district attorney discussing the law incorrectly when he was asked the question. He said, you can't have an aggravated assault unless you have bodily injury or a weapon. And that's just not the law. And it's disturbing to me because most people don't know. Most people aren't criminal lawyers, and they rely on the elected officials and people they admire or trust to give them correct information. And what the DA gave was not correct information. And if you think about it from a common sense perspective, like if I throw you off a 4-story building
right.
and you hit the awning, so you're not hurt, that doesn't mean I didn't intend to cause you serious bodily injury.
Right.
And when an individual is thrown head first into an immovable object, that's clearly demonstrates a disregard for the value of human life, especially with what we know about head trauma and head injuries now. The other thing that's very upsetting to me is most of us who work in the criminal justice system know that black women are disproportionately the victims of violence all over the country, and particularly in Allegheny County. When you disregard the well-being of a community of people that has traditionally been the victim or more likely to be the victims of violence, you're smacking every one of those people in the face.
Yeah.
And as a woman, I cannot imagine the district attorney doing that.
Yeah. I know you've seen the video, and I'm sure most people out there have seen the video. There are several times when not only, these men were obviously in charge of that situation the entire time, but there were times where it seemed like, the person would be over here, and one of the men would come over, and it was very aggressive, I believe, the attack. And if that's a standard, trying to cause bodily injury, serious bodily injury, from what you saw in the video, does that meet the standard, what you saw in the video? One of them gets their head thrown into the gas pump, I believe.
That's the most blatant example. But that same individual who picked a smaller, younger female and drove her head into an immovable object, that same man held her down so that another guy could hit her repeatedly. Yeah. And I heard the argument made that the guy who hit her, he hit her with an open fist. If you're holding her down, you have no control over what that individual does. So that when you're looking at an incident, you have to take into account the totality of the circumstances. Right. So when an individual who has held a young woman down so that another man, bigger, stronger, could hit her repeatedly in the face and head, and then is the same person drives her head into an immovable object, the totality of that circumstances would lead you to believe that he intended to cause her serious bodily injury.
And we talked a little bit about this just as we were getting ready to come on. Someone like Steven Zappala, who has a reputation for overcharging individuals, in this case, doesn't in his mind, I guess it would be overcharging. In most people's mind, it's the right charge. He doesn't do it here. And there has been that, and you brought it up earlier, but I've heard it many times in the community. You heard it during the Michael Roosevelt trial, that the African American community in particular doesn't get the respect that it deserves from Steven Zappala. What are your thoughts on how he's interacted with us? And we talked a little bit about that, but your thoughts on how he's interacted with that community?
Well, he's tone deaf.
Yeah.
And I think because he's running for re-election and there's a challenger who's saying you overcharge and you're not progressive and you're not trying to reform the system, he's so tone deaf and misunderstands the law that he's going to choose this case to undercharge.
Right.
I mean, I have people who can't get into ARD because they forged a check to feed their families because the victim objects. You're not going to make an exception for that woman or that person, but you're going to make an exception in this very public case. And it just shows that he's tone deaf to the community.
And I do want to, and I did mention this. There was a story that came out, I think it was shortly after you announced your candidacy, about an old case that you were involved in which you were in jury selection. Long story short, the sort of and you're welcome to fill it in. I don't want to shorten it so much that I misrepresent it. But the charge or the allegation, or, what people are saying is that you were trying to keep blacks off a jury. Black individuals off a jury, and your rationale, this is from some transcripts, it says that you weren't dismissing them because they were black, but because they were fat. Talk a little bit about that. I want to give you a chance to explain that and talk about that a little bit. And you had said that came from the Zappala campaign. That's the thing about politics, is you say it came from the Zappala campaign, and they say, oh, no, of course where else would it come from, that kind of thing, So talk to me a little bit about that, and about that time, about that case, and sort of how it's been represented since then.
Well, that case was from 92, I think,
Yeah,
so almost 30 years ago. And from the very beginning, when I was a public defender, I saw that the prosecutors were routinely striking black people from juries. And when the law requires that when you allege that they're striking people because of their race, they have to defend their strikes. Sure. So district attorneys would frequently defend their strikes with, oh, well, he was reading a book and I thought the book was weird and that's why I struck him. And judges would say, oh, okay, then that's a legitimate consideration. So in this particular case, I was representing a white guy who was accused of committing a racially motivated criminal mischief.
Right.
And the victim was black. So I think it was in retaliation for my always accusing DAs of striking black people from the jury that they accused me of doing the same. And so I was required to justify my strikes. Sure. So we went into chambers, which is just me, the judge, the DA, and a court reporter. Right. And I started making the same nonsensical bullshit strikes, justifications that the DAs always did. And the last one was that the lady was fat, and that's why I struck her. And I went over the top, and the comments were outrageous because I was trying to be outrageous and demonstrate this is all, nonsense.
Yeah.
And the rhetoric that I used was not. It was insensitive, and I think probably given my lack of knowledge at that time, 30 years ago, about racial stereotypes, I didn't realize that I was even playing into one.
Right.
I've certainly learned since then in the last 30 years that, you have to be very careful, even when you're being sarcastic or when you're being rude or when you're trying to make a point, you can't play into that kind of rhetoric.
Yeah. And I think there are two people that see that are going to take two kind of stances on it. It's either benefit, when you read the transcript, you either say these are the words, that's it, or you can give the benefit of the doubt that says you're reading a transcript. You're not hearing a tape. You didn't hear it. So I guess that's up to interpretation. I guess, but
well, I think actually when you read the whole thing and you hear how long and how ridiculous what I said was,
yeah,
that you would at that point say, this woman's either insane or she's, obviously
Right.
you're trying to make a point and being sarcastic.
yeah,
And what's interesting about that case is I won the case. We went to trial with that jury, the jury we selected that had black people on it. And I won the case. So there was really no reason for a transcript
Right.
to be ordered. But that was the day before Facebook and social media.
Yeah, yeah.
So our way of posting things to embarrass or mock people was to actually photocopy it and
Right.
put it up on the wall.
Right.
So that was actually on the wall in the DA's office, I believe. So 1 page or 2 pages of it.
In the future, if there are any attorneys out there that want to strike me from a jury because I'm heavy set, feel free. I'm all right with it. A couple more things I want to talk about with you. Police accountability is huge, and that's the DA can't run from the fact that he's been accused of not holding police officers accountable for their actions for quite a long time. What are your thoughts on how police officers have been, how these kinds of cases like the Antoine Rose case, like the Leon Ford case, although it wasn't a homicide, it was a shooting of an unarmed civilian in a car, and he's now confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life, although he has been up and moving thanks to therapy, which is great. But what is your stance on how police accountability has been handled in that office, and what are your plans to change it?
I think part of the problem, or main part of the problem, is that there's an inherent conflict of interest when you have a district attorney prosecuting, investigating police.
Yeah.
You have to work closely with the police if you're the district attorney. And in my world, in my district attorney's office, the police will be working very closely with the district attorneys in trying to divert people out of the criminal justice system. And if I want to work with them and I want them to cooperate, I certainly will not be prosecuting and investigating them. That's not the job of the district attorney.
Right.
I think that every single time an individual police officer is charged with inflicting injury on a citizen, that should be referred immediately to the state attorney general's office. It's like if my son is caught for a DUI, would you expect me to prosecute him?
Right.
No, you're going to say she has a conflict of interest. And it's the same for police officers when you're working like that with them and you're friendly with them and you're helping and supporting each other. You can't investigate and prosecute them.
Talk a little bit about the Michael Rosefeld case. What are your thoughts? I mean, there's been a lot of criticism about how that case was handled. Talk a little bit about that case, how you would have handled it. Were there missteps by the office in what you saw?
I think the original misstep was in investigating and prosecuting it, deciding to prosecute it within the district attorney's office because of that conflict. I mean, how are we ever supposed to have any faith that you're really trying to do the right thing for all the citizens of Allegheny County if you're handling it for your buddies? That case should have been sent immediately to the state attorney general's office. And if you're foolish enough to try the case yourself, do it right. Hire an expert, pick your most talented, vibrant, exciting prosecutor to present the case, and talk to the family of the victim. Let them know what the chances are and what the law is, and explain to them exactly what's going on in the process.
Right.
I think all of those things were handled very poorly.
Trying to think what the follow-up was. I apologize. After the aftermath of that, do you believe the aftermath of that case, we had massive protests for a few weeks. Do you think that that Zappala handled the aftermath of that situation properly?
Well, I think to make the comment that the protesters were from out of town is nonsensical.
Right.
I mean, that's just another example of his disengagement with the community that he's supposed to serve. those were people from Allegheny County. Those were people from East Pittsburgh and,
Right.
and Braddock and all of the areas that he won't go to.
Yeah.
Those were the people. And
Yeah.
there were plenty of people from all over the county, because what he doesn't understand is that black people aren't the only people in Allegheny County that care about black people.
Right.
We're all human beings, and if you can't support communities that have been disenfranchised and abused for years and years in Allegheny County, then you're not a representative of all of us, because it's not only black people that want black people to be treated fairly.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's tough to because injustice, when it happens in one place, it's going to happen in others, and it's just you can't be sure how the how other cases are going to be handled. It's just
Well, it's interesting because as a public defender for 30 years, like, some of the things that I've noticed, or that my colleagues have noticed, things aren't really a problem until they reach the suburbs, right? And it's the there were people in the city and people in communities of color that were severely affected by opiates for years.
Right.
But it's not a big problem, and it's not an epidemic until the kid in Fox Chapel or the kid in Shaler is affected by it.
Right.
And that's disturbing to a lot of us as well. But when you're not focused on communities, all the communities of Allegheny County, that's how you end up tone deaf, and that's how you end up with a massive spread of an opioid epidemic that could have been quashed if you'd actually cared about the people who were suffering 10 years ago.
You're listening to the Pittsburgh Current Podcast. We are here with independent Allegheny County District Attorney candidate Lisa Middleman, and we're talking about the upcoming November election. One thing, Lisa, that I found interesting is you had said that you had a plan to have an immigration attorney on staff. And, here in Beachview, where there is a large Latino community, is something that we think about a lot is, and, when we see, officers in the neighborhood or black SUVs, sometimes you're just like, kind of what's going on. So we're always on the lookout. But once folks are sort of in the system, it's tough to, I guess, keep their, to make sure that their rights are still being upheld. So talk a little bit about that idea and why you decided to, if elected, that you'll do that.
Well, I'll give you an example that can kind of demonstrate why I think it's important to have an immigration attorney or consider immigration consequences. You might have a family here in Allegheny County where, let's say, the man is undocumented, and he has a wife, he has children, he has a job, he's supporting his family. Say he gets into trouble with the criminal justice system. You want to consider what the immigration consequences are from a public policy standpoint.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people who say, well, if he's undocumented, then he should go.
Right.
Except you have to look down the line, which is you're going to impoverish a family who relies on him for support. You're going to break up a family. You're going to have children without a father figure in the home. And you're going to cause this woman to have to work excessive amounts to support these kids.
Right.
So then you have a mom who's not at home with her kids, who may get into trouble because they're not supported. And you just, when you wreck families like that, you end up wrecking communities. So that's the reason why you can't have that hardline stance that, oh, if you're here illegally, you have to go. You'll wreck families, you'll wreck communities. Another reason would be, say, for instance, a woman is undocumented in that same family situation, and she's being abused by her husband or by her boyfriend. If she believes going to the police will subject her to deportation, she's not going to get help. And she may get very, very seriously injured.
Yeah.
Or it's a boyfriend, he moves on because she doesn't get help and she doesn't report him. He goes on to another relationship and he kills someone.
Yeah.
So you have to think not only just about we have to have people following the rules, but you have to look at the broader public policy implications. So that's why I would always want the immigration consequences considered.
And there are several law enforcement agencies in this area that, there are several law enforcement agencies that do actively help ICE or try and establish residency of folks. But here in this region, we have like city police, for example. It's a policy. You don't, you don't work for ICE. You're not to actively, So would your DA's office also have that same policy, is that you would not be active? Like if you had someone come in your office who was undocumented, your folks, the second call wouldn't be necessarily to call ICE.
I'm never going to find out if they're undocumented because I'm not going to require it.
Right.
But you have, as district attorney, you have to prioritize where you're going to spend your resources and where you're going to spend your time. When we can stop guns from coming into Allegheny County, when we can stop children from shooting other children in Allegheny County, when we can get the rape kits tested that are sitting on shelves, when we can accomplish all of those things, then we can worry about other things that are less important.
I think in 2000 or 2001, I did that exact story about Crime Lab backup and all these cases, and at that time, folks were going free because there was no, if the case didn't proceed, by a certain time frame, then the charges are dismissed, and that was happening back then, and Steve Zappala was the DA. So this isn't a new problem. This backlog of rape kits, and I assume probably also ballistic evidence and so forth, it's not a new issue. What do you? I mean, and obviously I know you're not in the office, but what is the fix for that?
You have to prioritize what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you're prosecuting marijuana cases and you're sending marijuana to the crime lab to be tested, that's taking time, energy, and effort at the medical examiner's office that could be better served, doing work on more serious cases. The excuse that I've heard that's being given when women who are the victims of sexual assaults or their attorneys that they've turned to because they're not getting the help that they need from the DA's office, the excuse is we don't have enough resources and we don't have enough people working at the crime lab. We don't have enough time to get all these rape kits tested. Well, stop wasting your time on nonsense like marijuana.
Yeah. Lisa, what is your response to, and I'm sure you've been asked this, running as an independent is certainly an uphill battle. What's the experience been like, and what is the key, do you think, for you to win in November?
The response has actually been refreshing because, my first inclination was, people are going to think I'm some sort of weirdo independent because I'm not involved in one of the major parties. But when they understand that the position of district attorney is one that should be devoid of any political interests or political pressure, then they seem to say, oh, okay, I get that. That sounds right. You should be independent. Mm-hmm. And so the response has been really good. To win in November, I simply need people not to vote straight Democrat or straight Republican. I need for people to look at each individual race. Even if you end up voting all one way, do it thoughtfully and look at each different race. And I think that'll do it.
I have to think that, it's hard to say because certainly people have taken more of an interest in politics. I think that's got to be, we talked a little bit about this. Underdogs have made, across the country, underdogs have made some big upsets to win some offices. And here locally, we've had that now for the past year and a half where we've had that situation. Does it feel different to you? And I know this is your first time running for office, but does the vibe seem different to you in terms of people are more willing to make a change or to listen to an alternative candidate more than they had been in the past?
Well, I've lived in Allegheny County my whole life. You had to be a Democrat to get a job with Allegheny County. I think people have this vision of this Democratic machine where old white guys sit in a back room and decide who gets to run next. And I've had friends and folks in the DA's office who've had that experience. But I think we've seen and I think it's a female response to Trump, where people say, "Oh hell no," and they say, "I'm going to run when I think it's the time for me to run." And we've seen Sarah Innamorato and Summer Lee and Bethany Hallam and Pam Iovino and
Lindsey Williams
just say, "No, I'm running now," and I think people want to hear what I have to say, and they've all been successful because I think the Democratic Party has not quite caught up with that notion. They still think, no, well, they're not endorsed, or they're not part of our old guys network, so nobody will vote for them. And then they're very surprised that people do want change.
Right.
So I haven't been a politician before. Sure. I haven't run for anything, so I can't really gauge, but I have not had any pushback because I'm an independent.
I'm sure that there are some old white guys still sitting around wondering how the hell they got voted out of office. It's just, there's definitely a new time. Lisa, I want to talk to you about one other thing, but I just want to ask you, in terms of your campaign, anything else that I didn't ask you or that you would like to, make sure that people know about you and your campaign, your candidacy?
Well, my website is lisamiddleman.com.
Yes.
So if there are any questions about what I stand for, I actually annoyed everyone, I think, on my campaign staff by requiring a lengthy description of what my platform is. Yeah. And I think it's in reaction to not ever knowing what politicians really think or what they mean, or, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're running for office. You'll promise us anything. Right. How do we know you'll do what you say?" I put it in writing, and that's my word. That's what I intend to do.
And folks can also find you on Twitter at Lisa Middleman DA on Twitter. So this final thing isn't campaign related, but when I have a lawyer here, I'm going to bring it up. I have to talk about it. What do you mentioned you spoke Voldemort's name when you said Trump. What do you make of the whole impeachment inquiry? Where do you think it's gonna go?
That's interesting because I've been so wrapped up in my own stuff that I haven't looked a lot at it. But I don't think it's going to go well for either party, honestly. I think a lot of times politicians or people who are involved in politics do and say things because they think it's going to get a reaction that's positive, but they don't really think about the long-term ramifications of what they're doing. And I'm a little concerned that people like myself who've chosen to be independent because we're tired of the gamesmanship and we're tired of the posturing, of the major parties. I think that's going to turn people off.
Win or lose here, do you think that you would run for office again? Obviously, win you would certainly, but is this something that you've and again, you're not running because you're a politician. You're running because you want to see change. But have you gotten a taste for this, or is it sort of one of those things that, because I would imagine would have one or two effects on folks, where they'd be like, "Oh, this is the craziest shit ever," or it would be, this is kind of fun. So,
well, what's funny is my kids are 26 and 22, and when they first left the house, I thought I'm going to be free to do all these things. And when I found this, I went to work and I came home and I got very comfortable, not really going anywhere, just enjoying, the house that didn't smell weird anymore, right. Or coming home and not having like 7 kids asleep on the couch. So I really sort of became a homebody. And what running for office did was get me back out to all the places that I used to go and I used to love to be. So I can say that whether win, lose, run for office, don't run for office, I intend to certainly be in the areas that I've been and go to functions and meet people. That's the exciting, that's involved, that's the good and exciting part of running for office. The not good part is making phone calls, asking people for money, and but I've enjoyed the community days and the festivals and the fairs. I've just had a really good time.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope it was I don't know if it was a good time, but hopefully, hopefully our viewers. Too. Yeah, no, it's and I appreciate it. And I do want to say that I said this when you came in. When I talked to your team about you coming on here, normally there is you go back and forth to set a time. I was sent a link that basically said, schedule your 45 minutes with Lisa. And I have to say that this was the easiest setup to get a politician in here that we've ever had. I put my name in, said where to be, and you showed up. So I do appreciate that. I appreciate that function. I think that's something that more politicians should look at. It's
absolutely.
It's interesting.
And you have to show up.
Yeah.
You have to be available and you have to show up.
Absolutely. Lisa Middleman, thank you very much for coming out today. And thank you for joining us on the Pittsburgh Current podcast. New issue of the Pittsburgh Current is on stands now. And check out our Repeal Day party, December 5th. You can find information at pittsburghcurrent.com and on our Facebook page. Have a great week.
A better alternative, giving Pittsburgh a better alternative, giving Pittsburgh a better alternative.